In 1971, the Supreme Court held a trial called the New York Times versus the United States of America. Robert McNamara was the Secretary of Defense during the Vietnam War. McNamara held a secret study of the Pentagon to record all of the things the government did during the war. He recorded this study in a book called The Pentagon Papers. Daniel Ellsberg worked for the Pentagon, read the Pentagon Papers, and found out all of the terrible things the U.S. had done during the war. Ellsberg became a whistleblower and released the Pentagon Papers to the New York Times. The next morning, when Nixon read the newspaper to see the information that was being released, he was furious, and the Nixon administration tried to stop the papers from being released. The New York Times immediately took to the Supreme Court to try the USA for violation of freedom of press given by the First Amendment. The trial went a little like this.
We are here to discuss the case of New York Times versus the United States. The Times believes the government efforts to prevent the publication of information concerning the Vietnam War violates their First Amendment right to freedom of press. We will hear both sides' arguments before the jurors and I make a decision. If the New York Times would now please present your argument.
The New York Times did not do anything wrong. In the First Amendment, the framers gave the press the protection it must have to fulfill its essential role in our democracy. People must have access to uncensored information in order to make decisions and choose leaders. The press was created to serve the governed, not the government. Also, the newspaper did not publish information to hurt the U.S., but to keep citizens informed about the Vietnam War. And secrecy in government is fundamentally anti-democratic, and publishing materials that reveal mistakes made by the government is exactly why we want free press to have unrestrained publishing authority.
And now we will hear from the United States respondent, if you would please.
Considering that Richard Nixon is the President of the United States, this also gives him the title of Commander-in-Chief. This means any and all information about the U.S. military that is released to the public must be approved by Nixon. By releasing information from the Pentagon Papers, the New York Times has stripped Richard Nixon of his power. This means any information released by the New York Times must be taken down because it may cause public uproar.
With a 6-3 vote, the Supreme Court rules in favor of the New York Times that their First Amendment rights to press were violated because the information the Times wished to publish was not a direct and immediate threat to public safety. That will be all.